Welcome, dear viewer, to the majestic sands of ancient Egypt, where pharaohs reigned supreme and monuments reached for the heavens. It is here, beneath the shadow of Khufu's rising pyramid, that destiny weaves its most treacherous threads. When a catastrophic accident brings together Hetepheres, a devoted priestess of Isis, and Hemiunu, the powerful architect building a pharaoh's immortality, a spark ignites. But what begins as a sacred duty soon blossoms into a forbidden desire, threatening to unravel not just their lives, but the very fabric of their world. What secrets will be unearthed? Will their love survive the whispers of ancient power, or will a hidden truth demand an impossible sacrifice? Tell us, where are you watching this timeless tale unfold? And what is it about historical romances that truly captures your heart? Memphis, Egypt, 2,589 years before the birth of Christ. During the glorious reign of Pharaoh Khufu, when the Great Pyramid rose like a golden mountain toward the heavens and the Nile flowed. With the promise of eternal life, the morning sun blazed mercilessly over the construction site of what would become one of the world's greatest wonders, casting long shadows across the desert sands, where thousands of workers toiled like ants beneath the watchful eyes of the gods. The air shimmered with heat and ambition, thick with the dust of crushed limestone and the sweat of human determination. Here, in this sacred place where earth reached toward heaven, destiny would weave its first treacherous thread. The rope snapped with a sound like the crack of divine thunder. Time seemed suspended in that terrible moment as the massive limestone block, weighing more than 20 men, broke free from its harnesses and plummeted toward the workers below. The stone, destined to become part of Pharaoh Khufu's eternal resting place, instead became an instrument of mortal agony as it crashed into the construction platform with devastating force. Screams pierced the desert air like the cries of wounded birds. Men scattered in all directions, their white linen kilts billowing as they fled the chaos. Blood, crimson as the setting sun, began to pool in the golden sand, creating a macabre painting that would haunt the memories of all who witnessed it. From her sanctuary within the temple of Isis, Hetepheres heard the commotion and felt her heart clench with divine urgency. At 28 years old, she had dedicated her life to the goddess of healing and magic, her days spent in prayer and service, her nights in solitary contemplation. Her world was one of sacred rituals and whispered incantations, of healing herbs and gentle hands that could coax life back into dying flesh. Without hesitation, she gathered her woven basket filled with precious medicines, myrrh from the land of Punt, frankincense blessed by the high priests, and rare herbs that grew only in the shadow of the great temples. Her bare feet, accustomed to the cool marble floors of the temple, now flew across the burning sand as she raced toward the pyramid site, her white linen dress flowing behind her like the wings of a divine messenger. The scene that greeted her was one of controlled chaos. Overseers shouted orders in voices hoarse with authority and fear, while workers carried their injured comrades to whatever shade they could find. The metallic scent of blood mingled with the acrid smell of limestone dust, creating an atmosphere of barely contained panic. But it was not the chaos that stopped Hetepheres in her tracks. It was the man lying motionless beneath a partially displaced stone slab, his powerful frame twisted at an unnatural angle, his bronze skin glistening with perspiration and pain. Hemiunu, chief architect to Pharaoh Khufu himself, lay trapped beneath the debris like a fallen god. At 35 years old, he possessed the kind of masculine beauty that sculptors dreamed of capturing in marble. Broad shoulders that spoke of both physical strength and noble bearing, arms muscled from years of hands-on construction work, and a face that combined the refined features of court nobility with the rugged appeal of a man who had earned his position through merit rather than birth. His thick, wavy black hair was matted with dust and sweat, and his normally pristine appearance was marred by the violence of the accident. But even in his vulnerability, There was something magnetic about him, something that drew the eye and held it captive. As Hetepheres knelt beside him, their eyes met for the first time, and the world seemed to shift on its axis. His gaze was intense, almost black in its depth, and despite the pain that must have been coursing through his body, he studied her face with a concentration that made her breath catch in her throat. "My lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the surrounding commotion. "I am Hetepheres, priestess of Isis. I have come to heal your wounds." His lips, full and sensual despite being pressed tight with pain, curved into the faintest suggestion of a smile. "Then the gods have answered my prayers," he murmured, his voice deep and resonant even in his weakened state. "Though I confess, I never imagined divine intervention would come in such beautiful form." Heat that had nothing to do with the desert sun flooded Hetepheres' cheeks. No man had ever spoken to her with such intimate appreciation, and the effect was both thrilling and terrifying. She forced herself to focus on his injuries, her trained hands moving with practiced efficiency as she assessed the damage. His left shoulder had been crushed beneath the stone, the bone clearly displaced, and deep lacerations marked his arms and chest like the claw marks of some great beast. Yet as her cool fingers traced the extent of his wounds, she became acutely aware of the warmth of his skin, the solid strength that lay beneath the surface, the way his breathing quickened slightly at her touch. "This will require extensive treatment," she said, struggling to maintain her professional composure. "You must be moved to the temple where I can properly tend to your injuries." "I place myself entirely in your capable hands," Hemiunu replied, and something in his tone suggested he meant far more than mere medical care. The journey to the temple of Isis was a blur of careful transportation and whispered prayers. Hetepheres had overseen the movement of many injured workers, but never had she felt such personal investment in a patient's welfare. Every bump in the road, every grimace of pain that crossed his features, sent sympathetic pangs through her own body. Her private healing chamber within the temple complex was a sanctuary of peace and sacred power. Walls painted with scenes of Isis performing miracles were illuminated by dozens of oil lamps that cast dancing shadows across the room. The air was heavy with the scent of sacred incense and healing herbs, creating an atmosphere that seemed to exist outside the normal flow of time. As she began the delicate process of cleaning and treating his wounds, Hetepheres found herself drawn into conversation with this unusual patient. Unlike the typical court officials she occasionally treated, men who spoke only of politics and personal advancement, Hemiunu possessed a depth of knowledge that astounded her. "The pyramid," he said during one of their sessions, his voice dreamy with the effects of the pain-relieving herbs she had given him, "is not merely a tomb. It is a bridge between the earthly realm and the divine, a structure that will channel the very essence of eternity itself." His words sent shivers down her spine, not just because of their profound meaning, but because of the passionate intensity with which he spoke them. Here was a man who understood the sacred nature of creation, who saw beyond the mere physical to the spiritual significance of his work. "Tell me more," she whispered, her hands pausing in their ministrations as she became lost in his vision. "The chambers hidden within its heart," Hemiunu continued, his dark eyes fixed on her face with mesmerizing intensity, "will house not just the Pharaoh's earthly treasures, but the accumulated wisdom of our civilization. Sacred texts, astronomical calculations, the very secrets of life and death themselves." As the days passed, their conversations grew more intimate, more personal. Hemiunu began bringing her gifts, rare papyrus scrolls covered with architectural diagrams that revealed the mathematical precision behind the pyramid's construction, exotic perfumes from distant Nubia that filled her chambers with intoxicating fragrances, and jewelry of such exquisite craftsmanship that it could only have been created by the finest artisans in the kingdom. These were blessed by the high priests of Ptah, he explained, as he fastened a delicate gold bracelet around her wrist, his fingers lingering on her skin far longer than necessary. "They will protect you and enhance your natural beauty." The touch of his hands on her skin was like fire, sending waves of sensation through her body that she had never experienced before. As a priestess dedicated to Isis, she had lived a life of celibacy and spiritual devotion, her physical desires sublimated into religious fervor. But now, under the spell of this magnificent man's attention, she felt awakening within her, a hunger that had nothing to do with food or drink. 3 weeks into his recovery, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Hemiunu asked her to accompany him to the temple's highest balcony. His shoulder, though still tender, had healed remarkably well under her care, and he moved with renewed strength and grace. From their vantage point, the Great Pyramid dominated the landscape like a mountain crafted by divine hands. Its limestone blocks, still gleaming white in the fading light, seemed to glow with inner fire as the sun's rays struck their polished surfaces. "Do you see how the structure captures and reflects the light?" Hemiunu asked, standing so close behind her that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "When completed, it will serve as a beacon visible from the very heavens themselves, announcing to the gods that Pharaoh Khufu has achieved immortality." His breath was warm against her ear as he spoke, and Hetepheres felt her knees grow weak with a sensation she couldn't name. "It's magnificent," she whispered, though she was no longer certain whether she was speaking of the pyramid or the man whose presence seemed to fill her entire world. "As are you," he murmured, his hands coming to rest gently on her shoulders. "Hetepheres, in all my travels throughout the kingdom, in all my years at court, I have never encountered a woman who combines such beauty with such wisdom, such grace with such strength." Slowly, inevitably, she turned in his arms and found herself gazing up into eyes that seemed to hold all the mysteries of the universe. The space between them seemed charged with divine energy, as if the gods themselves were holding their breath in anticipation. "I have lived my life in service to Isis," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotions she barely understood. "I have never known the touch of a man, never felt the desires that other women speak of in hushed whispers." "Then let me be the one to awaken you to the full glory of your womanhood," Hemiunu replied, his voice rough with barely controlled passion. "Let me show you that love between a man and a woman can be as sacred as any temple ritual, as eternal as the monuments we build to honor the gods." When his lips finally met hers, it was with a tenderness that belied the strength of his desire. The kiss was soft at first, exploratory, as if he were mapping the contours of her soul through the simple contact of mouth against mouth. But as she responded, her own inexperienced lips moving tentatively against his, the kiss deepened into something that seemed to transcend the merely physical. Time ceased to exist as they stood locked in that embrace, the pyramid bearing silent witness to the birth of a passion that would reshape both their destinies. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their bodies trembling with the force of emotions too powerful to contain. "Hetepheres," Hemiunu whispered, her name on his lips like a prayer. "You have bewitched me completely. From the moment I opened my eyes and saw you kneeling beside me like a goddess descended from heaven, I knew that my life would never be the same." The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments and growing intimacy. Despite the whispered concerns of her fellow priestesses and the increasingly pointed questions from temple authorities about her frequent absences, Hetepheres found herself drawn ever deeper into Hemiunu's magnetic orbit. Her assistant Anku, a young woman of 22 whose loyalty to Hetepheres was absolute, tried repeatedly to voice her concerns. "My lady," she said one evening, as she helped Hetepheres prepare for another clandestine meeting, "the other priestesses speak of your association with the royal architect. They say that men of his position are known for using women and discarding them when their usefulness has ended. But Hetepheres, her heart full of newfound love, and her mind clouded by passion, dismissed such warnings with a wave of her hand. Anku, you speak from ignorance and jealousy. Hemiunu is not like other court officials. He sees beyond the superficial boundaries of class and position. He has promised to elevate my status, to make our love not just possible, but celebrated throughout the kingdom. When she repeated Anku's concerns to Hemiunu, he took her hands in his and gazed into her eyes with such sincerity that her doubts melted away like morning mist before the sun. My beloved, he said, his voice heavy with emotion, what we share transcends the petty concerns of those who have never experienced true love. You are not merely a priestess to me, nor I merely an architect to you. We are two souls destined by the gods themselves to find completion in each other. His words were like honey on her tongue, sweet and intoxicating, drowning out the small voice of caution that still whispered in the depths of her mind. As the month drew to a close, Hemiunu's recovery was nearly complete. The terrible wounds that had brought them together had healed into faint scars that only served to enhance his masculine appeal. But rather than returning to his duties at the pyramid site, he seemed to find ever more reasons to remain in her company. On the night that would change everything, he came to her chambers bearing a gift unlike any he had given before, a collar necklace of such exquisite beauty that it took her breath away. Crafted from the finest gold and inlaid with lapis lazuli and turquoise, it featured intricate hieroglyphs that seemed to dance in the lamplight. This was created specifically for you, he explained, as he fastened it around her throat, his fingers trailing along her skin with deliberate sensuality. The symbols represent the union of Isis and Ptah, of healing and creation, of feminine wisdom and masculine strength. The weight of the gold against her skin was both beautiful and somehow possessive, marking her as his in a way that was both thrilling and slightly overwhelming. Hemiunu, she whispered, her voice catching as his hands lingered at the base of her throat. What are you saying? I am saying that I love you, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. I am saying that I want you to be mine, completely and forever. I am saying that tonight, if you will have me, I want to make you truly a woman. The oil lamps flickered around them, casting dancing shadows on the painted walls where Isis performed her eternal miracles. The scent of sacred incense filled the air, creating an atmosphere that seemed to exist outside the normal world, in a space where only they existed. As Hemiunu drew her into his arms, Hetepheres felt the last of her resistance crumble. This was her destiny, she told herself. This was the love that the goddess had always intended for her. In his embrace, she would find not just physical fulfillment, but spiritual completion. Their first kiss as lovers was different from all that had come before, deeper, more urgent, filled with the promise of pleasures yet to be discovered. As his hands moved reverently over her body, worshipping her through the thin linen of her dress, Hetepheres felt herself transformed from priestess to woman, from servant of the goddess to goddess herself. My beautiful Hetepheres, Hemiunu whispered against her throat as he slowly, carefully began to remove her garments. You are more precious to me than all the treasures of the Pharaoh's tomb. You are my heart, my soul, my very reason for existence. In the golden glow of the oil lamps, surrounded by the sacred atmosphere of the temple, they came together as man and woman, their bodies moving in the ancient rhythm of love that had existed since the beginning of time. For Hetepheres, it was a revelation, the discovery that physical passion could indeed be as sacred as any religious ritual, that the joining of two souls could create a connection more powerful than any magic she had ever witnessed. As they lay entwined in the aftermath of their passion, Hemiunu's strong arms holding her against his chest, he whispered promises that seemed to encompass not just their immediate future, but eternity itself. Soon, my love, he murmured, his lips moving against her hair. I will share with you secrets that no other woman has ever known. The mysteries of the pyramid, the hidden knowledge that will ensure our love endures for thousands of years. Together we will build something eternal, something that will make the gods themselves envious of our devotion. Hetepheres, her body still humming with newfound pleasure and her heart overflowing with love, pressed closer to him and whispered her own vows of eternal devotion. She had no way of knowing that even as she spoke those words, Hemiunu's calculating mind was already cataloguing everything she had told him about temple personnel, their schedules, their knowledge, their potential usefulness to his true purpose. In the flickering lamplight, as the scent of their lovemaking mingled with the sacred incense, the first threads of a web of deception were being woven around her trusting heart. But for now, in this moment of perfect happiness, Hetepheres knew only love, only the overwhelming joy of having found her soulmate in the most magnificent man she had ever encountered. The goddess Isis, watching from her eternal throne, might have wept for the innocent priestess who had just surrendered not only her body, but her very soul, to a man whose heart was as cold and calculating as the stones of the pyramid he helped to build. 6 months had passed since that first night of passion, and the scorching Egyptian sun now found Hetepheres awakening in surroundings that had become as familiar to her as her own temple chambers. Hemiunu's private quarters near the pyramid complex were a testament to his elevated position and refined tastes, a world away from the austere simplicity of her religious sanctuary. The morning light filtered through intricately carved window screens, casting geometric patterns across walls adorned with the finest examples of Egyptian artistry. Miniature architectural models crafted from precious metals and rare woods occupied every available surface, each one a perfect replica of temples, palaces, and monuments that existed only in Hemiunu's brilliant imagination. Papyrus, scrolls covered with mathematical calculations and architectural diagrams, were carefully arranged on cedar tables, their surfaces protected by sheets of the finest linen. As consciousness slowly returned to her, Hetepheres marveled at how completely her world had transformed. The woman who had once found fulfillment only in prayer and healing now awakened each morning in the arms of the most powerful architect in the kingdom, surrounded by luxury that would have been unimaginable in her former life. She turned slightly in the silk-covered bed, her movement causing the golden collar around her throat to catch the morning light. The necklace had become as much a part of her as her own skin, its weight a constant reminder of Hemiunu's devotion and the promises he had made to her. The intricate hieroglyphs seemed to pulse with their own inner light, symbols of Isis and Ptah intertwined in eternal union. Beside her, Hemiunu lay propped on one elbow, his dark eyes studying her face with an intensity that never failed to send shivers through her body. Even in these quiet morning moments, there was something almost predatory in his gaze, though she interpreted it as the passionate devotion of a man completely consumed by love. "My beautiful goddess," he murmured, his voice still rough with sleep as his fingers traced the delicate line of her collarbone. "Each morning I wake wondering if you are merely a dream sent by the gods to torment me with visions of perfection." Heat bloomed in her cheeks at his words, just as it had 6 months ago when he first spoke to her with such intimate appreciation. Despite all the nights they had shared, all the whispered endearments and passionate embraces, she still felt like an innocent girl when he looked at her with such burning intensity. "And each morning I wonder how I was blessed to capture the heart of such a magnificent man," she replied, her fingers moving to touch the golden amulet that hung from a chain around his neck, a symbol of Ptah that seemed to emphasize his connection to divine creation. Hemiunu's smile was both tender and triumphant as he drew her closer, his powerful arms encircling her as if she were the most precious treasure in all of Egypt. "Today, my love, I have something special to show you." something that will demonstrate just how eternal our bond truly is. Later that morning, as they shared a breakfast of honey cakes, fresh figs, and wine mixed with spices from distant lands, Hemiunu produced a scroll unlike any she had seen before. The papyrus was of the highest quality, its surface smooth as silk, and the drawings upon it were executed with such precision that they seemed to leap from the page. "Behold," he said, unrolling the document with ceremonial reverence, "the plans for your eternal resting place." Hetepheres gasped as she studied the intricate drawings. The tomb he had designed for her was magnificent beyond her wildest dreams, a structure that rivaled the burial places of queens and princesses. Every detail had been carefully considered, from the grand entrance adorned with images of Isis to the inner chambers decorated with scenes of their love story rendered in eternal stone. "Hemiunu," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is too magnificent. I am but a priestess, not royalty. Such grandeur is not appropriate for someone of my station." His hand covered hers, warm and reassuring, as his eyes blazed with passionate conviction. "You are wrong, my beloved. You are destined for greatness far beyond the confines of your birth. Soon, very soon, political changes will occur that will elevate both our positions. When I am appointed as chief architect for all royal construction projects, when my influence extends throughout the kingdom, you will stand beside me as my queen." The certainty in his voice was intoxicating, and Hetepheres felt her heart soar with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. To be his wife, to share not just his bed but his life, his ambitions, his dreams of creating monuments that would endure for eternity. It was a future more glorious than any prayer she had ever offered to Isis. As the days passed, Hemiunu began sharing with her what he called the sacred architectural principles, knowledge that he claimed had been passed down through generations of master builders, secrets that connected the physical world to the divine realm. He spoke of mathematical ratios that mirrored the harmony of the heavens, of construction techniques that could channel cosmic energy, of hidden chambers designed to preserve not just earthly treasures, but the very essence of divine wisdom. "The pyramid," he explained one evening, as they stood together on his private balcony, the great structure rising before them like a mountain crafted by gods, "is not merely a tomb. It is a machine for achieving immortality, a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the eternal." His words sent shivers of excitement through her body, not just because of their profound meaning, but because she felt privileged to be the recipient of such sacred knowledge. Here was a man who understood the deepest mysteries of existence, who possessed secrets that could unlock the very nature of eternity itself. But even as her heart swelled with love and admiration, small, discordant notes began to intrude upon her happiness. During her occasional visits to the temple, she noticed that several of the skilled craftsmen who had regularly sought healing blessings for minor injuries had simply vanished. Katie, the master stonemason whose gentle hands could coax life from dead stone, had not been seen for over a month. Seneb, the carpenter whose intricate woodwork adorned the finest temples, had disappeared without a word of farewell. When she mentioned these absences to Hemiunu, his explanation was always the same. The workers had completed their assigned tasks and returned to their home villages, their services no longer required for the pyramid's construction. His tone was casual, dismissive, as if the fate of common laborers was beneath his notice. "My love," he said when she pressed him about Katie's sudden departure, "you concern yourself unnecessarily with the comings and goings of workers. The pyramid project is vast and complex, requiring different skills at different stages. It is natural that men should come and go as their particular expertise is needed." Yet something in his manner troubled her, a subtle tension in his voice that her healer's intuition recognized as deception. When she mentioned her concerns to Anku, her loyal assistant's face grew grave with worry. "My lady, Anku said in hushed tones as they prepared healing herbs in the temple's sacred garden. The other priestesses speak of strange rumors. They say that workers have been vanishing not just from the pyramid site, but from throughout Memphis. Skilled craftsmen, men whose knowledge of construction techniques is invaluable, simply disappearing without explanation. The unease that had been growing in Hetepheres' heart deepened into something approaching fear. "Surely there must be innocent explanations," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Perhaps they have found more lucrative employment elsewhere, or family obligations have called them away." But Anku's expression remained troubled. "Perhaps, my lady. But it seems strange that so many would leave without collecting their final wages, without saying farewell to friends and colleagues they have worked beside for years." During one of her explorations of Hemiunu's quarters, Hetepheres discovered substances that made her blood run cold. Hidden among his architectural tools were small vials containing powders and dried herbs that she recognized from her medical training, not as healing remedies, but as potentially deadly poisons. Aconite, known to cause paralysis and death. Oleander, which could stop a man's heart within hours. Hemlock, the silent killer that left no trace of its presence. When she questioned him about these substances, Hemiunu's explanation was smooth and reasonable. "My beloved, those are merely components for preserving papyrus and protecting wooden models from insects. The construction of monuments requires many materials that would seem strange to those unfamiliar with the craft." His words were logical, his tone reassuring, yet something deep within her soul whispered that all was not as it seemed. The man she loved, the man she had given her heart and body to, seemed to be hiding secrets that grew darker with each passing day. It was during a grand court ceremony celebrating the pyramid's progress that Hetepheres first glimpsed the political tensions that simmered beneath the surface of royal life. As she stood beside Hemiunu, among the assembled nobles and officials, she observed Prince Hetepheres, Pharaoh Khufu's eldest son and heir, looking unusually troubled. The prince, normally composed and regal in his bearing, seemed agitated as he exchanged worried glances with certain court officials. During a lull in the ceremonial proceedings, Hetepheres overheard fragments of hushed conversation that made her heart race with apprehension. "The pharaoh's increasing demands," one official whispered to another, "grow more unreasonable each day. His obsession with security has reached dangerous proportions. Divine judgment may fall upon us all if this madness continues," came the reply, spoken in tones of barely controlled fear. When Hetepheres quietly asked Hemiunu about the obvious tension among the courtiers, he dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "Royal succession always creates anxiety among those who depend upon royal favor for their positions. Prince Hetepheres naturally worries about maintaining his father's support, while others position themselves for whatever changes may come." Yet even as he spoke these reassuring words, Hetepheres noticed that his own demeanor had grown more tense, more watchful, as if he too were aware of undercurrents that threatened to sweep them all away. It was during this same period that she encountered Kenti, a young priest-physician whose reputation for innovative healing techniques had begun to spread throughout Memphis. Unlike the typical court officials she had met through Hemiunu, Kenti possessed a genuine warmth and compassion that immediately drew her attention. "Priestess Hetepheres," he said when they were introduced at a temple gathering, "your reputation as a healer precedes you. I've heard remarkable stories of your skill with difficult cases." There was nothing flirtatious or calculating in his manner, merely the professional respect of one healer for another. Yet as they spoke about their shared calling, Hetepheres found herself struck by the contrast between his approach to healing and Hemiunu's approach to architecture. Where Hemiunu spoke of monuments and eternal glory, Kenti focused on alleviating suffering and preserving life. "I have been treating many of the pyramid workers," Kenti mentioned during their conversation, his brow furrowed with concern. "The working conditions are harsh, and injuries are common. Yet I have noticed something troubling. Many of the most skilled craftsmen, men whose expertise is invaluable, have suddenly stopped coming for treatment. When I inquire about them, I'm told they have returned to their villages, but something about these explanations troubles me." His words echoed her own growing concerns, and for a moment Hetepheres felt tempted to share her fears with this compassionate man. But loyalty to Hemiunu held her tongue, even as doubt continued to gnaw at her heart. Palace servants, those invisible figures who moved through the royal quarters like shadows, began to whisper of Pharaoh Khufu's increasingly erratic behavior. The divine ruler, once known for his wisdom and measured judgment, had become obsessed with the security of his eternal resting place to a degree that bordered on madness. "The Pharaoh speaks of divine visions," Hemiunu mentioned one evening, his tone carefully neutral. "Revelations from the gods about threats to his eternal rest. He has begun consulting with priests who specialize in protective magic, seeking ways to ensure that his tomb remains inviolate for all eternity." The casual way he spoke of these developments sent chills through Hetepheres' body. There was something in his manner that suggested these were not merely the eccentric concerns of an aging ruler, but developments that held deeper, more sinister significance. As their relationship deepened, Hetepheres began to notice subtle changes in Hemiunu's behavior that both thrilled and disturbed her. Their lovemaking, once tender and reverent, had become more intense, more possessive. He seemed determined to mark her as his territory, to claim her so completely that no other man could ever hope to possess her. "You belong to me," he would whisper against her throat as his hands moved over her body with practiced skill, body and soul now and for all eternity. His words sent shivers of pleasure through her, yet there was something almost threatening in their intensity, as if he were not merely expressing love, but asserting ownership. He also began asking increasingly detailed questions about temple personnel, claiming that he wanted to understand her world better so that he could properly plan for their future together. Which priests had access to the sacred archives? Who among the temple hierarchy possessed knowledge of ancient rituals and protective magic? Which nobles frequently consulted with religious authorities about matters of spiritual significance? At first, Hetepheres was touched by his apparent interest in her professional life. But gradually, she began to realize that his questions followed a pattern, focusing always on individuals who might possess knowledge or influence that could be considered valuable or dangerous. The breaking point came on an evening when the desert wind carried the scent of distant storms across the pyramid complex. Hetepheres had arrived at Hemiunu's quarters earlier than expected, hoping to surprise him with a special meal prepared by the temple cooks. Instead, she found herself overhearing a conversation that chilled her blood. Hemiunu was speaking with another court official, their voices low but audible through the thin walls that separated his private chambers from his reception area. "The list of security risks continues to grow," the unknown voice was saying. "The Pharaoh's paranoia may be divine madness, but his concerns about protecting his eternal rest are not entirely without merit. Eliminating these risks is essential," came Hemiunu's reply, his tone cold and businesslike. "Every person who possesses detailed knowledge of the pyramid's true layout represents a potential threat to the Pharaoh's eternal security. The work must continue, regardless of personal feelings or temporary inconveniences." Hetepheres felt her knees grow weak as the implications of these words sank into her consciousness. When Hemiunu entered his private chambers moments later, she was sitting exactly where he had left her, her face composed despite the turmoil raging in her heart. "My beloved," he said, his manner warm and affectionate as always. "You look troubled. Has something disturbed your peace?" "I overheard voices," she said carefully, watching his face for any sign of deception. "Something about security risks and protecting the Pharaoh's eternal rest." It sounded rather ominous. His expression remained perfectly calm, his smile reassuring as he drew her into his arms. "My darling, You have stumbled upon discussions of standard precautions against tomb robbers. The Pharaoh's burial chamber will contain treasures beyond imagination, and we must ensure that proper measures are taken to protect them from those who would desecrate his eternal resting place. His explanation was logical, his tone convincing, yet something deep within her soul continued to whisper warnings that she struggled to ignore. The man she loved, the man who had awakened her to passion and promised her a future of unimaginable glory, seemed to be hiding secrets that grew darker and more dangerous with each passing day. Temple authorities, meanwhile, had begun to express their displeasure with her relationship more openly. The high priestess summoned her for a private audience, her ancient face grave with disapproval. Hetepheres, the elderly woman said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of religious authority, your association with the royal architect has become a source of scandal among the faithful. It is inappropriate for a priestess of Isis to consort so openly with court officials, particularly one whose reputation for ruthless ambition is well known throughout Memphis. Besides, when Hetepheres reported this conversation to Hemiunu, his reaction was swift and decisive. If the temple authorities continue to interfere with our relationship, he said, his voice carrying an edge of steel that she had never heard before, I will use my connections with the royal court to have you transferred to a remote temple where their narrow-minded prejudices cannot touch you. The casual way he spoke of manipulating her life, of using his political power to control her destiny, sent a chill through her heart. For the first time, she began to understand that her love for him had made her vulnerable to forces far beyond her control. It was while searching for a particular healing scroll in his quarters that Hetepheres made the discovery that would shatter her remaining illusions. Hidden beneath a stack of architectural drawings, she found a papyrus document that made her blood freeze in her veins. The scroll contained a meticulously compiled list of names, temple personnel, court officials, skilled craftsmen, and nobles, each entry accompanied by detailed notations about their knowledge levels, their access to sensitive information, and their potential as security risks. Her own name was there, marked with symbols that she could not fully decipher, but that filled her with inexplicable dread. As she stared at the document, her hands trembling with shock and fear, she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Quickly, desperately, she replaced the scroll exactly as she had found it and composed herself just as Hemiunu entered the chamber. "My love," he said, his eyes scanning her face with that intense scrutiny that she had once found so flattering. "You seem distressed. Is there something troubling you?" "Nothing at all," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos raging in her heart. "I was merely admiring your architectural drawings. The precision of your work never fails to amaze me." As he drew her into his arms and pressed his lips to hers, in a kiss that should have filled her with joy, Hetepheres felt as if she were drowning in a sea of deception and lies. The man she had given her heart to, the man she had believed to be her soulmate and salvation, was hiding secrets that threatened not just her happiness, but possibly her very life. The golden collar around her throat, once a symbol of love and devotion, now felt like a chain binding her to a destiny she could no longer trust. As the sun set over the pyramid complex, casting long shadows across the desert sands, Hetepheres realized that her world of love and passion had become a web of danger and deceit from which she might never escape. 2 weeks after the chilling discovery of the scroll, a document that had pierced the veil of her happiness and exposed the first brittle threads of deception, Hetepheres lay awake beside a sleeping Hemiunu. The moonlight, usually a soothing balm, now cast spectral shadows across the elegant chambers, mirroring the dread that had taken root deep within her soul. The meticulous list of names, marked with symbols she dared not fully decipher, burned behind her eyelids, a silent accusation against the man breathing softly beside her. Her heart, once a fervent drumbeat of love, now pulsed with a terrifying rhythm of doubt and fear. She knew, with the certainty of a priestess attuned to the hidden currents of fate, that she could no longer deny the darkness she had glimpsed. Tonight, she would seek the truth, no matter how profoundly it shattered her world. The hour was still cloaked in pre-dawn obscurity when Hetepheres slipped from the silk-laden bed, her movements as silent as a desert cat. The cool marble floor of Hemiunu's lavish quarters felt like ice beneath her bare feet, a stark contrast to the burning fire in her chest. She dressed in a simple, dark linen tunic and trousers, garments borrowed from a male servant that would allow her freedom of movement and camouflage her presence in the nascent light. Her healing basket, once a symbol of solace, felt heavy in her hand, filled not with herbs for comfort, but with the stark knowledge that she might need them for protection. The streets of Memphis, usually bustling with early morning vendors and laborers, were eerily quiet. The scent of cooking bread mingled with the faint metallic tang of the distant pyramid construction, a smell that had once filled her with wonder, but now only invoked a creeping sense of unease. Hetepheres moved swiftly through the labyrinthine alleys, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Each shadow seemed to lengthen, each whisper of the wind carried a premonition of danger. She knew Hemiunu would be at the pyramid site before the sun had fully climbed, overseeing the ceaseless work, but the thought of discovery was a cold knot in her stomach. She reached the perimeter of Hemiunu's personal workshop, a discreet, walled compound set apart from the main construction areas. This was where he crafted his intricate models, where he pored over his secret blueprints, where he said the true magic of creation resided. The heavy wooden door, usually secured with a complex bronze lock, was ajar, a detail that sent a fresh wave of ice through her veins. He had been so careful with his secrets before. What could have changed? Pushing the door open with a hesitant hand, Hetepheres stepped into the outer chamber, a space usually filled with the scent of cedar and beeswax, the glint of drafting tools, and the ordered chaos of creative genius. Tonight, a different, heavier scent hung in the air, something musky, metallic, and vaguely sweet. Her healer's instinct screamed in alarm. This was not the aroma of craftsmanship. This was the stench of something profoundly unwell. Her gaze swept across the familiar space. Scrolls, models, and tools lay scattered, but her eyes were drawn to a cleverly disguised section of the floor, a large wooden panel that seemed just a shade off from its surroundings. Her heart pounding a frantic rhythm, she found the hidden latch, and with a grunt of effort lifted the heavy panel. A waft of cold, foul air assaulted her, forcing her to instinctively cover her mouth and nose. Below, in a hidden, excavated chamber, lay a scene that would forever scar her memory, etching itself into the very fabric of her soul. This was no workshop. This was a charnel house. The chamber, barely illuminated by the faint light filtering from above, was filled with bodies. Not one or two, but dozens, arranged with a chilling, almost surgical precision. They were all men, their frames once powerful, now still and grotesque. Many were half-mummified, their bronze skin taut over bone, their eyes sunken hollows. Others were more recent, their flesh still disturbingly pliant. The sickeningly sweet smell of natron, mixed with the acrid stench of death and decay, overwhelmed her. Hetepheres felt a scream clawing at her throat, but no sound escaped. Her training as a priestess, her years of confronting death in its many forms, had prepared her for much. But not for this. This was not the natural cycle of life and death. This was murder, systematic, horrifying. Her eyes, usually quick to diagnose and heal, now raced over the gruesome details. Here, a worker with a crushed skull. There, another with a thin, almost invisible puncture wound in his chest. And then her gaze landed on a face she knew. It was Katie, the master stonemason whose hands could coax life from inert rock, whose smile was as warm as the morning sun. He lay amidst the others, his body twisted at an unnatural angle, his face serene in death, but his skin mottled with a faint, telltale blue. Aconite, the silent killer. She recognized her own knowledge, her own healing arts, perverted into a tool of death. The very herbs she used to restore life now used to extinguish it. Her hands, the same hands that had cradled Katie's injured arm weeks ago, now trembled violently. She reached out almost unconsciously to touch his cold face, her fingers tracing the ritual scar he bore. He had come to the temple for a blessing, for a minor ailment. Hemiunu had told her he had gone home, a lie, a monstrous, soul-crushing lie. Hetepheres forced herself to examine other bodies, her professional training battling with her rising horror. She recognized more faces: Seneb, the jovial carpenter, his body bearing the mark of oleander poisoning; Rekmire, the skilled scribe, his tongue swollen and black from hemlock. The methods varied, but the outcome was always the same: death. A systematic purge of those who possessed specific skills, specific knowledge. Amidst the silent horror, her eyes caught a glint of papyrus. Stacked neatly on a small stone shelf tucked away from the bodies were scrolls, not of architectural designs, but of something far more sinister. With trembling hands, Hetepheres pulled one down, her breath hitched. It was a meticulously compiled list, a death ledger. The papyrus scrolls contained a systematic record of the killings. Each entry detailed a worker's name, their specific skill: master stonemason, chief quarryman, expert scribe, ceremonial musician, and the date of their departure. But next to the date, a single hieroglyph, a small, ominous sign, indicated their elimination. These were not accidents. These were not men who had gone home. They were murders, calculated and cold-blooded, stretching back over the past 8 months. She discovered more. Maps. Intricate, detailed maps of the Great Pyramid, unlike any official plans she had ever seen. These blueprints depicted not just the public passages and chambers, but hidden tunnels, secret vaults, and concealed rooms deep within the pyramid's heart. These chambers were designed to hold more than just earthly treasures. They were filled with astronomical instruments of unheard-of precision, religious artifacts of immense power, and enough gold, she gasped at the sheer scale, to fund armies, to buy kingdoms. These were the true secrets of the Pharaoh's tomb, secrets Hemiunu had alluded to with such reverence, but whose protection had come at such a heinous cost. And then another scroll caught her eye, different in its texture, older. Its contents sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. This document wasn't a list of victims, but a chronicle of paranoia. It detailed Pharaoh Khufu's descent into madness, his increasing obsession with the security of his eternal resting place. The pharaoh had been consulting with Nubian sorcerers, dark priests from the southern lands, whose whispers of curses and tomb-robbing spirits had ignited a terrifying fire in his mind. They had convinced him that his enemies, even after death, would try to steal his divine essence from his tomb, that his journey to the afterlife depended on absolute, unbreachable secrecy. The pharaoh truly believed that every single person who knew his tomb's secrets, every craftsman, every priest, every architect, could potentially be corrupted by these dark forces and used against him in the afterlife. Letters from Khufu himself, scrawled with an increasingly frenzied hand, commanded Hemiunu to ensure perfect inviolability. He spoke of protecting his divine essence, even if it required the sacrifice of thousands of souls. His madness, carefully hidden from the public by his closest advisors, was laid bare in these chilling documents. The king, whom Hetepheres had revered as a living god, was a tyrant driven by insane fear. As if a dagger had been twisted in her own heart, Hetepheres then found notes, distinct from the others, meticulously filed. These detailed notes were about her, transcripts of their private conversations, assessments of her knowledge of temple hierarchies, her connections to influential nobles, and chillingly, her security risk level. Each intimate detail she had shared, every personal revelation, every moment of vulnerability had been catalogued, analyzed, and weaponized. Her heart screamed in silent protest. The love letters he had written, filled with honeyed words of eternal devotion, were revealed to be strategic documents. Her responses analyzed for useful information, for potential weaknesses. The most agonizing realization struck her. Even their lovemaking, moments she had cherished as sacred and transformative, had been calculated. He had studied her body's responses, her vulnerability, the depth of her passion, to determine the most effective ways to manipulate her emotions, to bind her to him, to extract her secrets. He had worshipped her body only to control her spirit. She felt utterly defiled, used in a way that stripped away not just her dignity, but her very essence. A sound, faint at first, then growing louder. Footsteps approaching the workshop entrance. Hemiunu, her breath caught in her throat. She moved with a desperate, frantic energy, replacing the scrolls, pushing the panel back into place, her fingers clumsy with terror. The metallic tang of death clung to her clothes, to her hair, to her very skin. She knew she couldn't hide the smell entirely, but she had to try. He entered the workshop, his presence filling the space with an oppressive weight. His eyes, usually so intense, swept over her with a chilling calmness. "My love," he said, his voice warm, affectionate, the usual honeyed tones that had once thrilled her now curdling her stomach. "You are early. What brings you here before the sun has claimed the sky?" "Hemiunu," she managed, her voice trembling, despite her desperate attempt at composure. She clutched her healing basket, the woven reeds digging into her palms. I could not sleep. I had a premonition, a terrible dream of sickness, of death, plaguing the construction site. Her eyes darted toward the hidden panel, then back to his face, searching for any flicker of recognition, any sign that he knew what she had found. His smile remained perfectly serene, untroubled. "My darling, you have a healer's heart, always attuned to suffering, but your dreams are merely echoes of the day's toils. All is well. The pyramid progresses. There is no sickness that I have not already foreseen and accounted for." His gaze, though calm, felt like a physical weight, pressing down on her. "But the missing workers," she pressed, desperate to see a crack in his facade. "Katie, Seneb, they were men I knew. Their families, they grieve." His smile did not falter, but a subtle hardening entered his dark eyes. "My beloved, you concern yourself too much with the concerns of common men. They were skilled, yes, but expendable. Necessary sacrifices for a greater purpose." He moved closer, his hand reaching out to cup her cheek. His touch, once electrifying, now felt like a viper's coil. The Pharaoh's eternal journey, his divine security, justifies any means. Every person who possesses detailed knowledge of the pyramid's true layout, every craftsman, every priest who has glimpsed its sacred chambers, represents a potential threat to his eternal security. The work must continue, regardless of personal feelings or temporary inconveniences. He then dropped the final, most devastating truth, his voice devoid of emotion. And it is not merely the individuals who pose a risk. Knowledge, passed from father to son, from master to apprentice, is a greater danger. The conspiracy involves not just murder, Hetepheres, but the planned elimination of entire families of skilled workers. To ensure no knowledge is ever passed down, to preserve the sanctity of Khufu's final resting place, the bloodline itself must be silenced. Hetepheres felt the world tilt on its axis. Her knees threatened to buckle. Everything she believed, everything she loved, was a lie. The man she had given her heart to, the man who had awakened her to passion and promised her a future of unimaginable glory, was a monster, a cold, calculating murderer, an instrument of a mad Pharaoh's paranoia. The horrifying possibility that she might be carrying his child, a silent, growing life within her, twisted her stomach with agonizing dread. What if she was already bound to this evil by blood? Hemiunu, seeing her distress, mistook it for sorrow, perhaps even understanding. He drew her into his arms, his embrace possessive, suffocating. "My beautiful Hetepheres," he murmured against her hair. "You are troubled by these necessities, but you are a priestess of Isis, a woman of wisdom. You understand the sacred order, the sacrifices required for eternity. I offer you a choice, my love. Become my accomplice, help me secure the Pharaoh's destiny, and our future together will be magnificent. You will be my queen, cherished and protected. Otherwise—" He pulled back slightly, his dark eyes boring into hers, a menacing glint replacing their previous warmth. "Otherwise, you have two choices. You can try to expose me, but you already know that several high-ranking temple and court officials are complicit. Your words would be dismissed as a madwoman's rant, and you would be silenced, permanently. Or you can try to flee. But where would you go, my dearest? My reach extends throughout this kingdom and beyond. There is nowhere you could hide that I would not find you." He leaned in close, his breath warm on her ear. "Prince Hetepheres, for instance, has been asking too many questions about the missing workers. He is becoming a problem, a target. We cannot have such weaknesses in our ranks. Choose wisely, Hetepheres. Your future, and perhaps even your life, depends on it." As Hemiunu's arms tightened around her, believing he had secured her compliance, Hetepheres looked over his shoulder, past his broad, treacherous back, toward the hidden panel. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, her heart with a cold, righteous fury. She would find a way. She swore by Isis, by every sacred vow she had ever made, that she would find a way to stop him, to expose the Pharaoh's deadly secret, even if it cost her everything she held dear. Her world of love and passion had collapsed, revealing a web of danger and deceit. But from the ashes of her shattered dreams, a new purpose was born. She would agree to consider his proposal, but only to buy herself time, to plan her resistance, to ensure that divine justice would finally prevail. 3 days had crawled by since the chilling confrontation in Hemiunu's workshop, each hour feeling like an eternity to Hetepheres. She knelt before the serene alabaster statue of Isis in her private temple chambers, the goddess's calm gaze a stark contrast to the tempest raging within her soul. The phantom scent of death still clung to her, a constant visceral reminder of the horrors she had witnessed and the monstrous secret she now carried. Her mind, usually a tranquil lake of contemplation, was a turbulent river, rushing with plans for resistance, for vengeance, for justice. As dawn's first timid light began to paint the eastern sky, she knew this was the day her gamble would begin. Failure meant death, but success, a fragile hope she clung to, could save countless innocent lives. Her first act was one of deliberate, almost ritualistic preparation. In the quiet solitude of her healing sanctuary, Hetepheres meticulously selected herbs and minerals from her vast array of sacred remedies. Her hands, usually guided by intuition and compassion, now moved with a cold precision born of necessity. She ground a potent blend of henbane, a narcotic that induced profound sleep and disorientation, and a precise measure of henbane's more potent cousin, mandrake root, known for its ability to induce temporary paralysis and confusion, without ever crossing the sacred line into outright poisoning that would extinguish life. Her vow as a healer, her sacred covenant with Isis, remained unbroken. She would incapacitate Hemiunu, render him harmless, but she would not make herself a murderer. The elixir, once completed, shimmered with an innocent, almost ethereal glow, belaying its true, strategic purpose. Next, she set about the painstaking task of documenting the overwhelming evidence of Hemiunu's crimes. With steady hands, she copied excerpts from the ledgers of death, sketching the chilling diagrams of the secret pyramid passages and meticulously detailing the Pharaoh's descent into madness from the letters she had found. Each stroke of her reed pen was a declaration of war against the darkness. She created not one, but 3 complete sets of these damning documents, hiding them in separate, inconspicuous locations within the temple complex. One beneath a loose tile in Isis's sacred bathing pool, another sewn into the lining of an old ceremonial tapestry, and the third concealed within the hollow base of a massive statue of Osiris, a silent plea to the Lord of the afterlife for justice. Her thoughts then turned to allies. Her loyal assistant Anku had been invaluable, her quiet observations in Chapter 2 now confirming Hetepheres' own fears. Anku, young but fiercely loyal, had a network of ears among the temple servants and knew the comings and goings of every official. Hetepheres knew Anku would stand by her, but she needed more. She needed power, influence, and unwavering conviction. Her mind replayed the brief encounter with Kenti, the young priest-physician, in Chapter 2. His genuine concern for the workers, his quiet probing into the disappearances, had struck a chord. She sent a discreet message, summoning him to her chambers under the guise of discussing temple medicine. When he arrived, his brow furrowed with concern for her evident distress, Hetepheres revealed a portion of the truth, enough to secure his unwavering commitment. Kenti, it turned out, had been conducting his own quiet investigation, treating a hidden enclave of workers who had miraculously escaped Hemiunu's assassins and were now sheltering in the labyrinthine sublevels of the temple, terrified but alive. Then there was Rahotep, the high priest of Ptah, a man of immense spiritual authority and political acumen. Hetepheres remembered his distant, watchful gaze at court ceremonies, his subtle disquiet regarding the vanishing craftsman. She knew he was a man of integrity, even if his methods were steeped in ancient caution. With Anku acting as her clandestine messenger, Hetepheres arranged a secret meeting. There, with Kenti as a corroborating witness, Hetepheres laid bare the Pharaoh's madness, Hemiunu's monstrous acts, and the vast conspiracy. Rahotep listened, his ancient face growing grimmer with each revelation, his wisdom confirming Hetepheres' intuition that the corruption ran deep. It was Rahotep who delivered the most vital piece of information. Prince Hetepheres, Pharaoh Khufu's eldest son and heir, had been quietly gathering evidence of his father's crimes for months. Horrified by the systematic murder of innocent workers and the increasing instability of his father's rule, Hetepheres had been seeking a credible path to intervention. Rahotep, always cautious, had been in secret communication with the prince, both seeking a way to stop the conspiracy without triggering a bloody civil war that would shatter the kingdom. Their alliance was forged in that moment of shared purpose and quiet desperation. They all understood. Exposing Pharaoh Khufu's madness was the only way to save future victims and protect the very soul of Egypt. With their alliance cemented, Hetepheres returned to her deadliest role, the compliant lover. She met Hemiunu as before, her movements practiced, her smile fixed, her eyes mirroring his possessive intensity, yet concealing a storm. Each touch, each whispered endearment, each stolen moment of intimacy became a meticulously choreographed deception. She played her part flawlessly, allowing him to believe he had secured her obedience, lowering his guard completely. While in his quarters, playing the role of his devoted confidant, she subtly accessed his private papyri, copying crucial documents, and with a sickening lurch, discovered the full, horrifying list of future targets. It included not only Prince Hetepheres himself, but several high priests, including Rahotep, and even her own mentor, and dozens of skilled craftsmen still toiling on the pyramid, their lives measured and numbered. The night she chose for their final encounter was moonless, draped in a velvet darkness that seemed to swallow all light. It was the night Hemiunu was scheduled to attend a crucial, covert meeting with Seneb, Ptahhotep, and Meria, his co-conspirators. The air in his chambers was thick with the scent of his arrogance, his certainty of dominion. She prepared his favorite wine, a rich pomegranate vintage, and with a hand that barely trembled, poured the shimmering, tasteless elixir into his goblet. They reclined on cushions, the flickering oil lamps casting long, dancing shadows that mirrored the deception unfolding. Hemiunu, engrossed in his plans, drained his cup. Within minutes his eyes glazed, his muscles relaxed, and a heavy, unnatural sleep claimed him, timing it perfectly to incapacitate him before his clandestine meeting. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This was it, the point of no return. With Hemiunu incapacitated, Hetepheres had only hours before his co-conspirators realized his absence, before the carefully constructed illusion shattered. She rushed through the pre-dawn streets, a shadow amongst shadows, clutching the incriminating evidence. Her destination, Rahotep's private residence within the Temple of Ptah. She burst into Rahotep's study, breathless, the scroll-bound evidence spilling onto his cedar desk. Khenti and Prince Hetepheres were already there, their faces grim, having also been summoned by Rahotep's urgent call. Together, they confronted other temple authorities, men of influence and power, revealing the chilling scope of the conspiracy. The Pharaoh himself, the living god, had ordered these atrocities. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. How could they oppose a god-king without destroying the very foundations of Egyptian society, without inviting divine wrath and plunging the kingdom into chaos? Prince Hetepheres, his face etched with sorrow and resolve, stepped forward. He revealed that he had been building a coalition of nobles and priests, men horrified by his father's actions, but unwilling to destabilize Egypt through open rebellion. His coup, he explained, would be presented not as an act of treason against divine authority, but as a necessary intervention to save Khufu from evil spirits that had corrupted his mind, twisting his divine purpose into murderous paranoia. The prince had gathered testimony from trusted palace servants, accounts of Khufu's increasingly erratic behavior, his whispered consultations with dark sorcerers, his isolation, his terrifying pronouncements. The weight of Hetepheres' evidence, coupled with Hetepheres' irrefutable documentation of the murders and Rahotep's spiritual authority, compelled the assembled religious leaders. With heavy hearts, they declared that the Pharaoh must be purified and healed by sacred rites before he could continue ruling, effectively removing him from power without public rebellion, maintaining the sacred facade while reclaiming control. As the sun began its ascent, casting its golden rays over Memphis, the final dramatic confrontation unfolded at the base of the Great Pyramid. Hemiunu, having recovered enough from the mild poison to realize his deception had failed, had managed to dispatch his loyal guards to find Hetepheres, but she was no longer alone. Protected by Prince Hetepheres' personal guard, she stood firm, watching Hemiunu being dragged, bewildered and furious, before an impromptu tribunal of officials and a stunned assembly of workers. Hetepheres himself presented the evidence. Hemiunu, his usual composure shattered, attempted to justify the murders as necessary for Egypt's security, for Khufu's eternal rest. But his words were drowned out by a wave of furious murmurs. The workers, already suspicious, erupted in a roar of outrage as they learned their missing colleagues, their friends, their family members, had been systematically murdered. The carefully constructed hierarchy of silence collapsed under the weight of truth. At the height of this public revelation, a terrible moan echoed from the royal pavilion. Pharaoh Khufu, confronted with the irrefutable evidence of his madness and his son's decisive challenge to his authority, suffered a massive stroke. His body convulsed, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed, utterly unable to speak or move. The assembled populace, witnessing this sudden, dramatic collapse, interpreted it as a sign of divine punishment, the gods themselves delivering judgment upon a corrupted ruler. Justice, swift and profound, followed. Hemiunu and his co-conspirators, Seneb, the treacherous chief of royal security, Ptah-hotep, the complicit high priest of Memphis, and Meriah, the greedy royal treasurer, were stripped of all rank and privilege. Their vast properties were confiscated, not for the royal treasury, but to establish a fund for the families of the murdered workers. As their ultimate punishment, they were sentenced to work as common laborers on the very pyramid they had helped design, to toil under the unforgiving sun, stripped of their power and forced to witness the monument rise through honest labor, not blood. The murdered workers, finally, were given proper burial rites. Hetepheres, her heart heavy but resolute, personally oversaw the solemn ceremonies, ensuring that each man was honored according to tradition, his journey to the afterlife blessed by Isis. These were not nameless victims. They were individuals whose lives had mattered, whose skills had shaped a wonder. Anku, Hetepheres' loyal assistant, was elevated to assistant high priestess, a testament to her courage and unwavering devotion. Prince Hetepheres, now regent, moved swiftly and decisively. He implemented sweeping reforms, establishing new laws to protect workers, ensuring fair wages, and requiring transparent documentation of all royal construction projects. The pyramid construction continued, but under a new leadership that valued human life alongside architectural achievement, a monument built on the promise of justice, not the silence of graves. The pyramid's true secrets, once sealed by blood, were finally revealed. The hidden chambers, filled with astronomical instruments, religious artifacts, and the vast treasure intended for Khufu's personal afterlife, were opened and meticulously catalogued. But instead of being hoarded, the wealth was repurposed, funding public works projects across the kingdom, feeding the hungry, building new schools, and ensuring the prosperity of all Egyptians. A new chamber, bathed in the gentle glow of oil lamps, was added to the pyramid complex, a memorial to the murdered workers, their names meticulously inscribed on its walls, ensuring their sacrifice would never be forgotten. The pyramid's true layout, once a deadly secret, was documented and preserved, a testament to their skill and a warning against tyranny. Over the next several months, as Hetepheres tirelessly oversaw the memorialization of the fallen and worked alongside Rahotep and Hetepheres in establishing new ethical guidelines for the temples, her relationship with Khenti deepened. His quiet strength, his unwavering compassion, his genuine commitment to healing and justice resonated deeply within her shattered spirit. He understood her pain, honored her grief, and patiently supported her as she healed from the profound trauma of Hemiunu's betrayal. There was no pressure, no calculated seduction, just a slow, natural unfolding of mutual respect and shared purpose. He truly represented everything Hemiunu had falsely promised, an honorable man, genuinely devoted to serving others, seeing her not as a means to an end, but as a partner in building a better world. 18 months after exposing the conspiracy, as the newly gleaming capstone was set atop the Great Pyramid, symbolizing its completion, Hetepheres and Khenti were married in a ceremony blessed by both Isis and Ptah. Their union, born of shared struggle and true companionship, symbolized the triumph of healing over hatred and honest craftsmanship over murderous ambition. She had been elevated to High Priestess of Isis, a position she accepted with humility and profound gratitude, her voice now carrying a moral authority that transcended mere rank. The pyramid, magnificent and awe-inspiring, now stood not just to royal power, but as a monument to the countless skilled workers who built it, their names etched forever in its newly dedicated memorial chamber. Prince Hetepheres, having firmly established his regency, continued to usher in a new era of justice, peace and prosperity for Egypt. He had established new laws protecting workers, guaranteeing their rights, and requiring transparent documentation of all royal construction projects, ensuring that no pharaoh would ever again use the blood of his people to secure his eternal rest. In the final scene of that glorious day, as the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in hues of gold and crimson, Hetepheres stood beside Khenti, her hand resting gently on her visibly pregnant belly. The Great Pyramid, bathed in the fading light, seemed to glow with a newfound sanctity. She reflected that true love, unlike the cold, calculating monuments of tyrants, was not built on deception or ambition, but on truth, trust, and the mutual sacrifice of two souls dedicated to a greater good. As she looked out over the thriving city of Memphis, a city reborn from the ashes of tyranny, Hetepheres knew with absolute certainty that this love, their love, was indeed eternal. 5 years had woven their tapestry across the land of Egypt, since the great secret of the pyramid had been laid bare, since the shadows of deception had been scattered by the light of truth. Memphis thrived, not with the frenetic, fearful energy of forced labor, but with the vibrant hum of a people who had rediscovered justice. In the tranquil, sun-drenched courtyard of the Temple of Isis, Hetepheres, now 35 years old, moved with a serene grace that spoke of hard-won wisdom. Her dark hair, still lustrous, was braided with threads of gold, framing a face that had matured, softened by the passage of time and the profound joys she had embraced. She stood before a group of young priestesses, their faces rapt, their hearts eager to absorb the ancient teachings. "The greatest power we wield," she explained, her voice carrying the melodic resonance of the Nile, "does not lie solely in the herbs we gather or the incantations we whisper to Isis. Our true strength, my daughters, lies in our ability to recognize truth from deception, to discern love from manipulation. It is the wisdom to see beyond the gilded promises, to trust the whispers of our own hearts, even when the world attempts to silence them." Her gaze drifted beyond the temple walls, toward the colossal silhouette of the Great Pyramid, now gleaming under the benevolent gaze of the afternoon sun. It no longer represented a monument built upon a foundation of lies and blood, but a testament to human ingenuity and the enduring spirit of justice. Its very presence seemed to breathe a different story, one of shared effort and collective triumph. Beside her, a familiar, reassuring presence settled. Anku, now herself a respected high priestess, her 27 years gracing her with a quiet authority, offered a small, knowing smile. Anku, who had once been Hetepheres' timid assistant, now served as her closest friend and trusted advisor, their bond forged in the crucible of fear and defiance. Their eyes met, a silent language passing between them, a shared memory of a darkness they had overcome together. "The lessons you impart today, my lady," Anku murmured, "are the very lessons that saved us all." The tapestry of society had changed, slowly but irrevocably, under the stewardship of Pharaoh Hetepheres. He ruled not with his father's chilling paranoia, but with a profound sense of responsibility and compassion. The children of the murdered workers, once destined for hardship and obscurity, now blossomed under Hetepheres' patronage. Compensation had been justly distributed, new schools built, and opportunities previously reserved for the nobility were extended to all, fostering a new generation of skilled artisans and scholars. Many of these young men and women now worked on Hetepheres' own ambitious building projects, their names proudly etched into the stone, their futures secure. Even the fate of the old pharaoh, Khufu, had settled into a quiet, tragic rhythm. He remained in a private wing of the palace, his mind forever lost to the stroke that had claimed him, his body tended by a rotating team of priests and healers. Hetepheres, ruling as pharaoh in all but name, visited him dutifully, a son's silent vigil for a father whose power had consumed his soul. It was a somber reminder of the price of unchecked ambition, a haunting echo of the past that served to illuminate the path of the future. And the pyramid's hidden chambers, once repositories of deadly secrets, had been transformed. They were no longer tombs of terror, but centers of learning. Scholars from across Egypt and distant lands now came to study the astronomical instruments, to decipher the intricate mathematical knowledge, and to marvel at the wisdom preserved within those ancient walls. The very mysteries Hemiunu had once guarded with murder now freely illuminated the minds of thousands. Hetepheres herself found her truest joy not in the accolades or the power, but in the quiet moments. Her love for Kenti had not simply endured, it had deepened, matured like a fine wine. Their bond, forged in the fires of shared purpose and unwavering trust, was a testament to the fact that true love could bloom even in the harshest desert. He was her anchor, her confidant, his gentle strength a constant solace to her warrior spirit. Their hands, often intertwined, spoke volumes of a connection that transcended words. Their home, a spacious but unostentatious dwelling near the temple, echoed with the joyful sounds of children. 2 sons, their eyes bright with curiosity and their laughter a melody, were their most precious treasures. The eldest, a boy of 4 named Osiris, possessed his father's kind eyes and his mother's spirited intellect. The younger, a robust 2-year-old named Horus, was a whirlwind of energy and boundless charm. Their very existence was a triumph, a living embodiment of the love that had defied darkness. One evening, as the family gathered on their rooftop terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, Kenti held Hetepheres close, their children playing at their feet. "You saved us all, my love," he whispered, his lips brushing her hair. "You saved Egypt from a madness that could have consumed it." Hetepheres leaned into his embrace, her heart overflowing with a bittersweet nostalgia for the trials they had faced and an immense gratitude for the peace they had found. "We saved ourselves, Kenti," she corrected softly, her gaze sweeping across her family, then towards the pyramid, standing proud and defiant against the twilight. "We learned that true power comes not from monuments of stone, but from the justice we uphold, the truth we speak, and the love we nurture. That, my beloved, is the only legacy that truly endures for all eternity." As she spoke, the Great Pyramid, bathed in the soft, lingering light of dusk, no longer seemed a symbol of deadly secrets, but a silent, majestic sentinel over a land that had finally learned the profound truth. That human achievement, however grand, must always be built on justice, and that the purest love forged in the crucible of adversity shines brighter than any pharaoh's gold. And so, our epic saga concludes, a tale woven with the golden threads of ancient Egypt and the timeless struggles of the human heart. Hetepheres' extraordinary journey reminds us that even in the darkest of times, courage can triumph over fear, and truth will ultimately shatter the most elaborate deceptions. Her story is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever faced betrayal, and a fervent reminder that fighting for what is right, no matter the cost, can forge a legacy more enduring than any pyramid. True love, as Hetepheres and Kenti discovered, is not found in gilded cages or whispered promises of power, but in mutual respect, unwavering honesty, and a shared commitment to justice that burns brighter than any flame. We hope this grand adventure through ancient Egypt, filled with its tender romances, shocking betrayals, and ultimate triumph, stirred your heart as deeply as it did ours. What moment resonated with you the most? Did you cheer for Hetepheres' unwavering courage, weep for her profound betrayals, or find solace in her enduring love? We are eager to hear your thoughts, your emotions, and your reflections on this epic journey. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you truly stayed with us until the very end of this grand adventure, please type the word eternity, so we know who walked this path of destiny with us. Crafting tales of this magnitude, with their rich historical detail and profound emotional depth, is a labor of love made possible by a dedicated team. If you wish to show your appreciation and help us continue bringing such captivating narratives to life, consider sending a super thanks on YouTube. Any amount, large or small, is a cherished gesture of support for our work. And if a super thanks isn't possible, Your greatest gift to us is to share this story with friends, family, and fellow lovers of historical romance. Spread the word, for every share helps our channel grow and brings more enthusiasts into our narrative world. Don't forget to check out our other enthralling narratives in the cards above. Perhaps your next great adventure awaits. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey. Until next time, may your own stories be filled with courage, truth, and eternal love.